Very good morning to you from Westminster. We've been here all morning this morning, just trying to work out how we are going to re-engage you with the Brexit process after seeing Mitzi on the sofa.
It's
the world we live in, isn't it?
How are we going to top Mitzi? We're going to try. Let's tell you what's happening. Of course, Boris Johnson has now agreed an agreement with EU leaders. Next, though, is the challenge of persuading MPs in the Commons to accept it tomorrow.
Let's talk it through with some of our guests this morning. Tim Stanley is from the Daily Telegraph. Ayesha Hazarika is from the Evening Standard. Hannah Al-Othman is from BuzzFeed. Very good morning to all of you.
Morning.
Tim, do you want to kick us off? This is an extraordinary time, and Saturday is going to be an extraordinary event in the Commons. What's your sense, with your contacts, about how this will unfold?
I have absolutely no idea, and every time one makes a prediction it always goes horribly wrong. But what I will say is the government feels very positive. They're convinced that it's close enough that if they can peel away a handful of Labour rebels, they might be able to get it. So the most generous, optimistic prediction is that right now the government is 3 votes short, which means it only needs to win over 2 votes in order to win the deal and get it through Parliament. Can they get those extra 2 people? Well, on the other side of the table, Labour is desperately whipping its MPs not to support the deal, making all sorts of threats. So it's going to be incredibly tight, but the government does feel that it's tantalisingly close, and right now it's very optimistic.
Hannah, how are you feeling about this?
I think Boris Johnson's still got a huge challenge ahead of him. I think the thing that's moved since Theresa May's deal is that he has a lot more of the ERG on board. They're more supportive. But for Labour MPs, they're saying that this is a worse deal than the one that Theresa May had in terms of protecting the Good Friday Agreement, in terms of workers' rights. But then, we're several months further down the line. There's a lot of pressure on MPs to get this done and move on. So there are some, I believe, that are wavering, that didn't back it last time, that may do, but I think it's just too close to call.
So it's a very neutral view almost that you're taking. Ayesha, we've heard Tim's view. Tell us your view from the Evening Standard.
Well, I agree with all of that. I think it is very, very tight, and what is going to be critical is how these Labour MPs react. A lot of pressure is being put on them. A lot of emotional pressure as well, in terms of, look, if you vote for Boris Johnson, you're going to be crossing a sort of political picket line. As such, words like scab have been used. So the emotion is running very high. A lot of people are saying, look, because workers' rights have been moved to the political declaration.
Well, some people are confused about that. Can you kind of simplify
that? The political declaration is an intent. It's not sort of legally watertight at this stage. So it's a leap of faith into the future. And for what a lot of Labour MPs feel is a Conservative government, particularly a more right-wing leaning Conservative government, can you trust them on workers' rights when actually a Conservative government has rolled back a lot of workers' rights in terms of access to tribunals, the rights of trade unions? There's a lot of women facing things like maternity discrimination as well. When they were in the coalition government, they tried to bring forward a raft of proposals to cut workers' rights. The truth is, Keir Starmer did a very kind of forensic thread on Twitter last night appealing to Labour MPs, saying, look, if you care about workers' rights, which is a really big part of the brand of the Labour Party, this is not a deal that you can trust. But there's lots of Labour MPs who are also very aware, as Hannah said, this is the last time for them to get this over the line. Many of them represent Leave constituencies. So I feel the pressure on them is really huge over the next 24 hours.
Tim, we spoke to Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab this morning, not keen to engage in the thought process. What if it goes against you? Understandably, there is a mantra at the moment. But that's a real question, isn't it? Given how tight you said is, what if it doesn't go Boris Johnson's way?
The government has welcomed the fact that the EU has given signals that it won't permit an extension. I think most people calculate that in reality the EU will then have an extension if the government loses this vote. That then means we're into delay, and we're pretty much back to where we were last week. The government will be trying to seek an election. It's difficult to see what changes the government could possibly make to this deal. This is pretty much the last roll of the dice, which is shown in the fact that there is such growing unity within Tory ranks behind the deal. As I was saying before, when it comes to trying to get to that magic number that'll win it, they are getting the ERG back on side. They're getting many of the Tories who have quit or stood down from the government back on side. It's difficult to see with this Parliament, in a fixed-term Parliaments Act, in which you're stuck with this Parliament, it's difficult to see at this stage that you can get any deal passed. So if, in that situation, the government just about loses, the EU grants an extension, the government's argument is going to just be essentially an election-footing one. It's going to say this Parliament stopped the best deal we could possibly get.
Well,
this Parliament has to end.
Interesting on the front page of the Telegraph, your paper. So the PM has now proved he is indeed a statesman. This is an election footing, briefly, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, if this deal doesn't get through, we are going to be looking at an election. I imagine Boris Johnson's line in that will be like, I tried my best, it was Parliament that stopped it. That's going to be worrying for, I imagine, Labour MPs. They don't want to go into election on that. But then he has promised to deliver it by the 31st. So if he doesn't, then he's going to put himself at risk of losing votes to the Brexit Party.
Hannah Al-Othman, Ayesha Hazarika and Tim Stanley, thank you all so much for joining us this morning.